is there any response from here on the panel, particularly around, say, digital innovation? And I guess the sort of the teaser I'd put out there is the work that you've done at the New Zealand Institute about weightless exports, and that sense that the communications technology these days enables us to create these extraordinary virtual communities, whether they're in the country or sort of around the world. What's your sense of where those opportunities might lie for us?
Well, I think I'd make a couple of observations. Well, three perhaps. The first is that one of the advantages of ICT is that you get a double whammy from it. If you invest in it, you get not only the business opportunities, but you get the increase in capability that you can then apply to existing businesses. So it's a particularly attractive thing. That, of course, means that a lot of people want to get into it. The second is that, we've talked about the knowledge economy a lot and the weightless economy and the growth of technology-based businesses, and we're sort of waiting for that to happen. But,
That's right.
But interestingly, New Zealand exports about $40 billion worth of exports, merchandise, a year. The size of the exports from our top 100 technology companies that are internationally focused is around about $4.8 billion a year. So it's growing, and it's growing, and the average revenue per job in there is around about $250,000. So, yes, it's happening. But we're working on this at the moment. One of the interesting observations is that New Zealand companies develop something and then they take it to the market, and they'll spend years developing it and getting it right. They'll take it to the market, and the market will say, "What's this you've got? We didn't want that." And we're doing this over and over again, partly because we're sort of distant and it's expensive, and partly because we think we're good at making stuff. And we are good at making stuff, but what we're not very good at is going out and finding out what other people want and what they're willing to pay for. And so our businesses are not growing as rapidly as they might. And an important reason for that is that we're actually not as internationally engaged as we ought to be in making sure what we're doing is actually configured correctly for the markets we're targeting. So there's a lot more opportunity, and some of those things are relatively easy to fix, and we will get a decent kick in the economy coming through as more and more of those businesses become successful.
Now, AJ and Sven, you represent that international engagement at a sort of an intimate physical level in terms of being students here. But in terms of you sitting here and being connected back to your friends and your communities in India and Germany, what does it feel like being here? And what's the opportunity for us in New Zealand to engage with your friends and your colleagues back home in your countries, so we can start to, build that much bigger community of engagement and start to do more of that stuff that Rick's identifying.
Well, most very important issue here is renewable energy. Germany, Liechtenstein, all the countries I've been living in, they're spending billions on money to actually trying to get independent of oil. And New Zealand has the opportunity to do it relatively cheap. You've got a lot of sun here, you've got hydro energy. You could be independent of oil, but you don't do it somehow. That's something like people will never get in Europe. They won't understand it. I can't even explain it like properly. And saying that, I was looking at GDP statistics of imports, and I was surprised to see that oil was between 18 and 11% of GDP. And that's not, I was surprised at that level, like the discrepancy of it. And it's not because people need more oil, it's because the price of the oil is rising and falling. So considering we're going back to the oil price we had before, or even increasing, it might even grow up to like 25-30% of GDP, of like all the exports. And that's like where a lot of money is going to be lost. And that's one really good opportunity that should be forced now.
AJ?
In my experience, again, going back to technology as well, there's so much opportunity for people of the same demographics around the world now, especially to engage with each other, and there is that opportunity being lost, and I have a feeling that we'll see the impact of that in the next few years. I mean, youngsters around the world are now talking to each other and at levels which haven't been done previously. And there is that knowledge of technology as well within my demographic in New Zealand. But they're being let down by the companies and the government, and there isn't enough focus on technology. And so even though they want to use it, they don't have access to, like, for example, fast broadband, and just the possibility of what it can open up. And the impact of that would be felt in, I don't know, 2020 or 2025. So there needs to be something that can change and give youngsters that opportunity to actually engage with the world.
Now, in the closing moments, I'll just frame this slightly. We have had some good diagnosis this evening at the outset. We know many of the things that we think would be useful. We've had sort of a tentative stab at what some of that bigger ambition might be. We've thought about a bit about what the role of the government is versus others, and the role of that leadership. And we've sort of toyed with the idea as to whether we need a crisis to do this, or whether there might be some other way of energizing this. So, in the nature of these discussions, they, we've, and this was never the intention of the evening to end up with a blueprint as such, but we've certainly sort of traversed across those issues.